Is a 0 CAC score an insurance policy against heart attack and heart disease? Maybe not. Today, I talk with a board-certified cardiologist about what are the risks to heart disease. We talk about heart rate variability, vitamin D levels, and so much more, so stay tuned. Welcome back, my friends. My name is Sarah. I am known as Carnivore Yogi. Thank you so much for being here and clicking on today's video. Today, I talked with Dr. Michael Twyman, who is a board-certified cardiologist, has worked with patients for many years and still does as a practitioner. And you guys know I love the conversations with doctors who actually work one-on-one with patients on a daily basis. I believe that their vantage point is unique. There are a lot of people in the space who are not working one-on-one with patients, and so a lot of their advice might be a bit more anecdotal and from a different point of view. So Dr. Michael Twyman is a very experienced cardiologist, and I wanted to ask him about low vitamin D levels, especially if someone has been out in the sun all summer, what he thinks is an ideal diet for someone. Is it keto carnivore when we're looking at heart health, and then how we can actually prevent heart attack, stroke. We get in this little kind of echo chamber in the keto carnivore community and just say everyone should do this. But Dr. Twyman really does explain how certain people and different blood tests that they can use may want to switch their diet out a little bit. We also really dive into mitochondrial haplotype, which is where your body is actually ancestrally from. Is it north latitude or southern latitude? How that plays into your diet and the environment that you should be experiencing to recover and improve the health of your mitochondria, and so much more. This is just a really wonderful, information-packed episode that I think you guys are really going to enjoy. Feel free to check out the timestamps if you want to skip around or just see the different topics that we talk about. So thank you for watching. I want to thank the two sponsors of today's episode. The first one is going to be Upgraded Formulas. You guys know I am a huge fan of the Upgraded Formulas magnesium. If we do not have enough magnesium, we're not going to be able to produce ATP, which is the energy that our mitochondria produce. This episode is packed full of talk about the mitochondria. So you can use my code YOGI12 over at Upgraded Formulas for that magnesium. They also have an amazing hair tissue mineral analysis that I continue to do every 90 days and have my clients to do to see if their minerals are balanced. Again, these mitochondrial functions are not going to work as well if we do not have adequate mineral balance. So check out Upgraded Formulas, use my code YOGI12 to save there. The second sponsor is going to be Optimal Carnivore. I have a bottle of their grass-fed organ complex here. I also have some of their beef liver organ complex in my freezer. Now, I love these because my family does not really like to eat organ meats, but we all know, and especially during the winter months, how important it is to get those nutrients from organ meats into our bodies. So Optimal Carnivore is an excellent choice if you would like to supplement organ meats. So you can get the discount by using my code Carnivore uppercase Y on Amazon, and I will put the links for you guys in the information section. Thank you again for watching, and thank you to my sponsors. They make things like timestamps possible for the show. So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and please do share it out with anyone you feel could benefit. All right, talk with you guys again soon. Bye. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for coming back and tuning in. I am very excited about today's guest. I have a quantum cardiologist here with me, and I'm really excited to get his take on things like cholesterol, heart disease, from his point of view of a quantum cardiologist. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Twyman, just kind of giving everyone a little bit of your background. You're a legitimate cardiologist. You served in the Army. Can you tell everyone a little bit about your history?
So I did all my conventional training at St. Louis University School of Medicine. After I completed my internal medicine training, I actually was in the Navy. I did some payback time in Beaufort, South Carolina, mostly taking care of the Marine recruits in that area, as well as the retirees. And then when I completed that 4 years of active duty, came back to St. Louis University, did 3 more years of general cardiology, and I'm a board certified cardiologist. But my passion now is really focusing on kind of disease at a much earlier stage and waiting for somebody to have that heart attack or stroke. So I launched my own practice 2 years ago, and kind of came upon the quantum world probably 2-3 years ago, and deep down that rabbit hole of light water magnetism. So really looking at mitochondrial health and how that light water magnetism impacts the mitochondria, because the heart is mostly mitochondria.
It is, yeah. The largest sources of mitochondria is the brain and the heart, and for women, of course, the ovaries, the eggs, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, how did you come upon mitochondrial health and light water and magnetism? What's your story to kind of dive and got your practice moving in that direction?
So back in 2017, my wife wanted to go to the country of Bhutan, which is sandwiched between China and India, and it's about the size of Indiana for those in the States. But where I'm currently located in St. Louis, it's about a 14-hour flight to that area. So pretty long jet lag, chances to go that far. So did some research on how to kind of mitigate jet lag and came upon these blue blocking glasses, and didn't really know any of the science at that time. I just bought the glasses, hopped on the plane with them, got over there. Jet lag wasn't that bad. And so when I got back, started doing a lot of reading about circadian biology. And then a couple of years later than that, I met a gentleman who had worked with Dr. Cruz, and then introduced me to that world, and just been reading Jack's blogs, and there's thousands of podcasts he has. So that's how I kind of got into that light water magnetism world.
Awesome. And how did you start integrating it into your practice with your patients?
Initially, it was just mostly the kind of the circadian code book by Dr. Panda, just teaching people how to, time their windows of nutrition, and then just the importance of, natural sunlight, especially in the morning time, to set your circadian rhythms. That's still my kind of bread and butter things to teach people with. And then, if they want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, then teaching them about photobiomodulation and deuterium depleted water and all that fun stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, my audience is definitely interested in that. And I saw on your website, you're a photobiomodulation expert, correct?
Enough to be dangerous. I guess, I don't know, expert is a term other people give me sometimes, but yeah, I have fun with it and been playing around with some different panels, and I have this giant beast panel in my office, and just seeing how well I can charge people's mitochondria up with it.
Yeah, I'm very jealous of your large EMR tech panel. I always see it on your page, and I know Chris posts a lot on his page also.
Yeah, I mean, had about 6 weeks, and have a few patients who've really given it a go, and yeah, they all rave about it.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, I know you're a cardiologist, and so my audience, a lot of them are keto and carnivore. And so there's always a lot of questions about cholesterol. And, I know it's like a broad question, but I wanted to talk about cholesterol. I also wanted to talk about the CAC score, because, what do people really need to be concerned with when we're thinking about preventing heart attack, heart disease, those types of things?
Great question. And that's the thing, is that, I take care of a lot of people who have done carnivore and keto diets, and, they're, get mixed messages, that cholesterol doesn't matter. Your cholesterol's high, you're going to have a heart attack. Well, first off, go look at the health of the arteries, what is going on inside, because the blood work is just a biomarker. It just tells you, what are probabilities. So, the arteries tell the whole story. So to have plaque in your arteries, you got to have 3 things. You got to have endothelial dysfunction, so that inner lining of the artery gets damaged. You got to have inflammation, and you got to have the right lipoproteins going through the system, sticking to that endothelium and depositing or dumping their payload into the walls of the artery. So you'd mentioned that calcium score test, also known as a CT coronary calcium score, or CAC scan, generally about $100 or so in the US. And it's a low dose radiation CT scan. And it looks at the 3 arteries that sit on the outside of the heart. Generally, you should not have calcium in the arteries. Calcium is supposed to be in your bones. So if you have calcium in your arteries, it indicates that plaque is present, and the body's trying to repair that plaque by fibrosing it and scarring it down. So if your calcium score is 0, you're generally considered low risk of having a heart attack or stroke, irrespective of what your cholesterol is. But if you have a calcium score that's 400 or higher, you're pretty high risk, and you probably want to talk to your doctors about doing something to mitigate your lipid profile. But first, test the arteries, what are the health of it. Then use the biomarkers to kind of guide things. And you mentioned, cholesterol. Cholesterol, was put into you by Mother Nature, God, or whatever you believe, to help you. It's not there to necessarily harm you. And so there's no such thing as good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. There's just cholesterol. Use the cholesterol to make your hormones, to make your bile acids, to make the cell membranes. So without cholesterol, you're dead. The only quote bad cholesterol is the cholesterol that gets deposited into the walls of the artery. So how does it get there? It gets there by these lipoproteins. And the lipoproteins are basically like cargo ships or cars. They're made in the liver. They fill up full of triglycerides, which is energy for the cells, vitamins, different things called phospholipids, which are building blocks for the cells. And those lipoproteins deliver it through the blood vessels. If the blood vessels are healthy, that's great. But the blood vessels are injured or sick, those things kind of stick there like Velcro, and they may get retained into the walls of the artery, and then plaque forms. And the plaque is basically, think of it like a pimple or abscess building up on the wall of your artery. Generally, it's going to be very silent until that pimple ruptures, and then that's what the heart attack or stroke actually is.
Wow. Yeah, I have a lot of people that have, quote unquote, high cholesterol, and their CAC score is 0. That's not for everyone, though. I did have a client recently that her cholesterol was, I think, about 300, and her CAC was a 169. And I was like, you know what? At this point, I think you need to, I need to refer you out to somebody, because this is well beyond my expertise here. And those two markers together just make me feel a bit uncomfortable,
No, and that definitely should. I mean, that's appropriate referral out to somebody like myself, or somebody who can actually tell the person, okay, what is the risk to continue that type of diet? Or, are they willing to go on, different supplements or medications to modify the lipid profile? So, so first look to see, if the calcium score is 0, great, they're low risk. That doesn't mean that that's still the perfect diet for you. There's still some other things you may want to look at. There's a lot of guys online, that are, hardcore carnivores, pumping up that, they got a calcium score of 0. But that just means they're just not late to the game. They're not, calcifying plaques in their arteries. They could have a lot of soft plaque building up in their arteries, still be at high risk of a heart attack and not know it. So you have to do a little bit more advanced testing in those people to really tell them, okay, your diet's not having a negative impact on your artery health.
What kind of testing would they need to look at?
The two big ones would be endothelial function test. So how much nitric oxide can your arteries release? If you have healthy nitric oxide in the artery walls, less likely that those lipoproteins are sticking to the arteries. And then there's a special type of carotid scan called a carotid intimal medial thickness test, or CIMP scan. Ultrasound that looks at the thickness of the walls of the artery. If your arteries are getting thick, it means the walls are inflamed. And if they're inflamed, there's more likely plaque to develop. That test will also give you something called the vascular age. So if you're biologically 45, but your arteries are 65, you're actually 65 years old.
Wow.
So that's how you want to know. Like if your arteries are aging faster than you, then whatever you're doing currently is not working for you, and you got to be more aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm all about this last year. I've really gone down the rabbit hole of circadian biology, and my focus on diet has become less and less. And I've become over the last, and after putting myself on the internet for the last 3 years and just sharing my journey with everyone, I've talked with like thousands and thousands of people at this point. And I feel pretty good at this point about saying that I don't know that everyone needs to do carnivore or a ketogenic diet, nor is it the best thing for everyone. I'm sure I'll probably get people that listen to this and watch it on YouTube and they're like, what? But I feel like we need to have a conversation about, what type of person may not want to have 80% of their diet be fat.
I mean, and that's the thing too, is that, nutrition is important. I'm not going to ever tell people it's not, but the light environment, your circadian rhythms are going to trump that. And so, most diets ideally should be seasonal. You would be eating what normally would have been outside your home. Like, if you can some food, great. But most of the time, if you're in a northern environment and there's not a lot of sunlight that time of year, you don't have a lot of vegetables and fruits. So you'd be more ketotic, or you'd eat more carnivore that time of year. And in the summer, you'd switch it back up. That kind of goes into the mitochondrial haplotype. That's something you can get off your 23andMe report. That gives you an idea. Ballpark is a keto carnivore diet likely to work for you. It doesn't explicitly tell you that, but it gives you an idea. And then there's some genetic tests you can do called APOE. If your APOE is a 4, the keto diet might not necessarily work well for you. And there's some other testing you can do that tells you how well you absorb fats from your gut. So some people have I'll use the medical term, they have a broken Niemann-1 pick-like receptor. Basically, it's a bouncer on the gut lining, and that, it senses what's floating through the gut. Well, that bouncer sometimes opens up and lets, the lipoproteins come right back in. So it sends it back to the portal circulation. So you basically open the doors back up, and now your cholesterol levels are going to keep rising because you keep absorbing everything through your gut. So those are the people that, they need to consider a certain medication that keeps that door closed if they're going to continue that kind of diet.
So someone that has maybe like a cholesterol over 500, do you think that that's concerning, or they should look in to see if they are lacking specific fat transport systems in the body?
For sure. Yes. I mean, if somebody's, total cholesterol is 500, their LDL-C is 300, now is that a problem? Likely, but, go check first on the health of the arteries. So do they have healthy endothelium? Do they have healthy intima? So their vascular age is younger than their biologic age. Great. Their calcium score is 0. Great. Okay. Then look at the blood work and look at the lipoproteins, like something called APOE, which is just basically how many cargo ships are carrying that cholesterol around the system. Look at the inflammation, if any is present. If you have inflammation, you got to fix that. And then you could look at these kind of fat transporters. So there's tests that can tell you, do you have a broken Niemann-1 pick-like receptor, and you're going to hyperabsorb this stuff through your gut. The APOE gene, you only got to check that once. If you have an APOE4 gene, keto and carnivore might not necessarily be right for you. And there's a couple of different labs that can check your it's called your like your saturated fat balance. So, how well are you absorbing that? So you can decide if, the fat transporters are working appropriately or not appropriately based off that type of blood work.
What about omega-3 to 6 ratio? How does that play into that? And should people test that and be concerned about having a high omega-6 to 3 ratio in the blood?
That's great. Yeah, that's one of the tests that's included that, checking that saturated fat profile. It'll give you that information. So, evolutionarily, the ratio is almost probably close to 1-to-1, where you'd only have, 1 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. In the standard American diet, the diet's probably like 15 to 20 times higher in omega-6 than it is omega-3.
Mm-hmm.
And the omega-3s are, mostly the cold water fish. That's the DHA and the EPA of those that you're actually, using. Now, the EPA is a little bit more important for vascular health. The DHA is a little bit more important for brain health and the neurovascular system. But, you can get that test pretty simply, and it gives you the ratio. Ideally, you like that omega-6 to omega-3 ratio be less than 4-to-1.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's my big concern with people now that I've started entering the world of, quantum physics and circadian biology. I eat a spoonful of salmon roe almost every day, at least 5 days a week. Because I know I do have the APO gene. I did test that. And so that's one thing I'm super, super careful with, is make sure I get the spoonful of salmon roe in there. But you think you have concerns with people that have that gene, period, eating saturated fat? I hear different doctors say different things.
In ways, yes. I mean, sometimes, those people need to be, cutting the saturated fat down probably less than 50 grams a day, and then substituting more with monounsaturated. So the avocados and the olive oils, can be replacement if they want to stay on that kind of high fat diet. That's kind of the first step is, if they're not really willing to come off of a high fat diet, is switch up the types of fats. And then, if their lipid particles don't improve, or their, vascular inflammation markers don't improve, then you got to really kind of have that conversation, like, and you may be feeling benefits of your brain health, but your cardiovascular system's going to take a hit over time if you can stay on this type of diet.
Yeah, that's what I'm always curious about, is like one system sometimes will work really well when you do a diet like that, but then are we pushing down another one? Like I had a really good talk with Dr. Will Cole about that, because he's more of a plant-based keto doctor. And so it was interesting to talk to him from my perspective. And yeah, I mean, I think that we have to keep an open mind when we're looking at things like that. And now I'm so much on fire about light and circadian biology. It's like, we don't have to be married to a specific diet. I think it's important to keep an open mind.
100% agree. I mean, I think the biggest tips are, people need to focus on just, there is no perfect diet for everybody. It's, individualized, and it can be individualized to your quantum yield that you have in your local environment.
Yes. And speaking of that, you mentioned the mitochondrial haplotype. I just did a consult with Dr. Gazvini. I don't know if you know Corey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine, and we figured out that my haplotype is an H. So that's why I'm upping my cold therapy right now. And for people who are like, what is she even talking about? My ancestry is like a Northwestern European history, or ancestry. That's my mitochondrial haplotype. So for people who are in the lower equatorial, their haplotype is there. What would you say for them, diet wise, would be a little bit more appropriate that you see work with your patients a little bit better?
So for the people who are more, equatorial or, tightly coupled haplotypes, those are
Yeah.
the people that need to run more on sunlight, and those are the people that need to, potentially be more, they could be more carbohydrate based. If they're in a high light environment, they
In
can get
that
away with
latitude.
that. They'll be able to kind of burn that stuff off more efficiently. But, I mentioned, why would cold therapy even be beneficial for somebody with an H haplotype is that, I usually kind of use my fingers as the respiratory proteins, they're far apart. When you use that cold therapy, you get those things to come together closer because the mitochondria are making heat, and that heat shrinks the water around them, and then the electrons funnel more efficiently through the mitochondria respiratory proteins that way. So, anything that makes energy more efficiently, you can turn your brain on better, you can turn your heart on better, you can turn on your immune system better. Or if you're trying to get pregnant, you want your ovaries to work better. So, energy is the key.
Exactly. And that's where we really need to look at when it comes to our health, is not like, let's say everyone needs to do this or everyone needs to do that. I think that's where I'm really enjoying a lot of this work, is dialing it into, mitochondrial haplotype, and then the latitude that you're at. Like, everyone's freaking out about Dr. Salidino right now. I don't know if you know him very well. Yeah.
Mhm.
He's in Costa Rica, and he's surfing all day. He's on the beach all day, and he's talking about eating a lot of carbohydrates and eating a lot of fruits. And I think that people don't understand, when you're in that sort of a latitude, UV light is going to deplete your glycogen. You've got the sand, the sun, the surf, all of those things. And you can get away, I think, with eating a lot more carbohydrates. But if you're in Connecticut in November, like it is now, maybe you shouldn't be eating bananas and papayas and and all of those things, right?
Correct. I mean, when you have a high UV, index on your eyes and skin, your body's glucose sensitivity is better. You're going to be able to handle that a little bit more effectively. We also, if you want to go down the rabbit hole of deuterium, it's a
Yes.
deuterium story. So when you're, in, Costa Rica, you can clear, the deuterium more effectively than you can being up in Detroit and having no sunlight, at 5 o'clock at night. So you're exactly right. That's why there is no perfect diet for anybody. It depends on your haplotype, and it depends on your latitude, and then also the population density. How many other people are hanging around with you with their cell phones and everything else.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the big thing I see. And I'd love to get your take on this. I have a lot of people that reach out to me since I've been talking about vitamin D levels, and how that I doubled my vitamin D. It was like at a 33 in May. And then I got it up over 100 when I tested it in September, with no supplements, just sunlight, just going outside, sunrise, getting UVA and then UVB, like trying to do it in the correct order. I was able to get that up over 100, which is crazy. Of course, they freaked out when I got it done. They were like, "Oh, no, 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 that's terrible. That's toxic." And I was like, "I'm not worried. It's at 80 now, so it's come down a bit because it's November." But what about people? This is what I'm seeing. A lot of people in big cities. Now, I am in Atlanta, but I have a lot of people in New York and LA that follow me that literally laid out in the sun all summer, and their vitamin D didn't budge at all. Do you think that's because they're in like a high EMF environment, or like you said, people have a bunch of cell phones and just Wi-Fi and all kinds of things everywhere? Do you think that it plays into it, their
I
inability to deplete deuterium?
Not just deuterium. I think it's also just that their intracellular water is not
Mm.
as, the exclusion zone isn't as great. And if you don't have water hydrating your cells, it doesn't matter how much solar exposure you're getting, you just can't harness that power as well. And so, I just had a consult before we jumped on this. This gentleman's, vitamin D levels like 32. And I
Mm.
was like, well, I want to see at least 60 from a cardiovascular standpoint, without supplementing. But when you're using your technology, you have to be protecting your eyes. You have to be, trying to cut down on the EMF exposure, because the EMFs are basically like microwaving you. You're dehydrating yourself. And when you're dehydrated, you don't make vitamin D. Vitamin D is a hormone. So and the people that are in LA and New York and say, they're going outside and, picking their clothes off and they still have vitamin D levels of 20 something, it's probably because of, the EMF exposure in great part.
Yeah, I agree. And that's a hard conversation to have. Jack, when I interviewed him, I felt like it was like a freight train kind of running through my living room. I didn't get to ask as many questions, but he was like, yeah, if you live in a big city like that, then I would recommend those people drink deuterium depleted water or move. What would your recommendations be for somebody like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I know that's sometimes his default answer is you got to move, but
Yeah.
so, first figure out, is there something a little bit easier that you can do? Like, are you wearing your blue blocking glasses when you're using your technology with screens? Do you, try to mitigate, the EMF, at least when you're sleeping, so that, you have a low EMF period when your body can do autophagy and apoptosis and repair the damage, so that maybe the next day you're able to harness the solar, frequencies a little bit better in the water that you can make. So, there are some steps you can make, but if it's a chronic kind of condition that you have, then yeah, you might need to do stuff like, do a sun run every once in a while and go soak up, a better quantum yield for, 4 or 6 days. And then maybe that gives you a boost for a month or so. And then, once you kind of figure out that, you can do that and, maintain your health the way you want, great. But if not, then yeah, then you maybe do need to figure out, do you need to move further south based off your kind of health? If you got cancer or autoimmunity, you gotta do more than somebody who's just trying to, remain optimal when they're 25 years old.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing, when we hit 25, we start to have a decline in mitochondrial function. And I think people don't really understand none of us are getting out of here without that, but we have to figure out ways to help ourselves not decline in that way.
For sure. And, that's kind of the, I take a family history from a patient, I will ask about, siblings and dad's, health, but I always start with, how healthy was your mom? How healthy was her mom? Because that gives you an idea of kind of what mitochondria that, the person that's in front of you likely was born with. And I tell them, sometimes people are born with, 20-year-old parts inside. And so they're the people that are breaking down in their 30s, but their insides are basically 50 or 60 years old. So, every 10 years or so that you live, your mitochondria get, 10% less effective at making energy. So, if life is energy, you have no energy, you're dead. So what can you do to protect the mitochondria is really the key for optimizing health span and longevity.
And do you think somebody who is born with mitochondria that's a little bit older, so their parents passed down some DNA that had a little damage on it, do you think they can improve their mitochondrial health, or are they just going to be fighting an uphill battle for a lot of their life?
It depends on, what environment they are. I mean, if their parents were born in a low solar quantum yield type place and you stay in that place, you're likely to break down just like your parents did. So, you maybe can mitigate it with, more earth and grounding, photobiomodulation, more sun gazing, drinking cleaner water than your parents did. But if, you're getting sicker sooner, you need to do more. And if you've already done all the biohacks, then you need to go where you can get more stable UV light for yourself to charge up more effectively.
So even somebody with like a northern haplotype still would probably want to go towards more UV light, you think?
They can at least use UV. I mean, the people with the northern haplotypes can also still use CT year round to kind of benefit things. So the cold therapy will help you, basically shuttle energy more effectively in the mitochondria. And then when you get UV exposure with it, you're, kind of synergistically benefiting the energy production with UV and cold. So it really is depending on, what the person's, issues are at that moment. If somebody's got cancer, autoimmunity, severe heart disease, they have to do more. If it's just somebody young and wants they want to kind of, I usually tell people like, you got to kind of plan the end game. If your goal is to live, 100 years old, what's that look like for you? And then you got to reverse engineer. What do you need to do to get there in a healthy manner? If you don't keep your muscles healthy, if you don't keep your brain healthy, what's the purpose of getting to 100 years old?
Exactly. And, you mentioned talking with a patient about family history, about their parents what other markers do you use or questions do you ask to determine someone's mitochondrial health? I know they have probably come in with a list of symptoms and things, but do you have like a formal assessment that you use or ways that you can determine that?
I mean, it's, basically it's going to be stuff, how well do you sleep? How much energy do you have? I take care of some, high level athletes, but, the weekend warriors, how easy are your exercises? You're recovering well from those. The mitochondrial, there's no specific lab you can say, okay, you got good mitochondria, you got bad mitochondria. It's a whole type of a panel of labs that kind of support it. But, people are not sleeping well. They're generally not going to have healthy mitochondria. So start with that first. And then once you got them sleeping well and they got the circadian rhythms dialed in, then you can kind of dig into the blood markers to see what remains and what you need to fine tune.
Got it. I was curious to know your thoughts on vitamin D supplementation. Are you in the camp of let's not go there and let's try to find some more natural ways to bump that up? Or do you use supplementation with patients?
I mean, it's a great question. In my former life, I probably supplemented every single person because everybody was deficient.
Yeah.
And then once I learned a little bit more about how the world really works from a quantum standpoint, I supplement a lot less people. I personally don't supplement myself. I was one of those people that supplemented a lot and had a vitamin D level like 120 with supplementation. So I
Oh,
stopped
wow.
that, and then now I think my most recent vitamin D is like 75 without supplementing. So I know you can do it, and you just mentioned that you can do it as well without supplementing. So now if somebody's blood levels are less than 30, I'll generally at least supplementing up to that point, but while still teaching them, you still need, sunlight on your skin to sulfate the cholesterol so that it actually activates the vitamin D. So, it's the story of, vitamin D, is a hormone. It's just telling you what your body is being exposed to in the environment. And so if you're putting a vitamin D pill into your stomach, but your eyes and skin don't see that same message, your body's like, where did this come from? You're not in, high UV light this time of year. So it's not going to give the body the same message. And also, in this day and age, your skin makes a lot more compounds when UV light hits it. So you want to kind of know that if somebody's natural vitamin D level is, 20 without supplementing, they're probably missing a lot of other compounds too. If their blood levels are 60, they're probably making the things that their immune system needs to fight off infections. So if you have a high blood level and it's kind of augmented artificially, that doesn't necessarily tell you that their immune system's working optimally.
Interesting. And what are your thoughts on people using like a vitamin D lamp, maybe with an EMR tech or a red light panel to supplement during the winter?
I think it's an option. I personally have one. I have one of the Spurdy Fiji
Yep.
lamps,
Sturdy.
but it's one of these where I highly encourage people to follow the directions to a T, because this is the one wavelength of light. If you don't know what you're doing with it, you could definitely injure yourself. So, less is probably more with these things, so follow it based off your Fitzpatrick type. So how likely it is that your skin burns. If you've already built up a solar callus, you probably can do a little bit more, but that is definitely the next level biohack is that in Mother Nature, you would never have just UV by itself. You'd always have the other healing wavelengths of light, and red would always be present with it. So that is the biohack, is if you're going to use one of these pretty D-type lamps, also have a photobiomodulation panel with it so that you're getting the red and infrared at the same time.
I agree. And I feel like I need to make a long YouTube video explaining the whole Sperity lamp, because if I'm going to use my lamp, I've already seen sunrise that morning. I don't have to get my daughter to school until 9 o'clock. So I see sunrise, and then her and I usually are out there for UVA light. So what people don't understand is UVB, it's like a cascade. You want to have that cortisol making a gradual rise. It's like a sunscreen for your body to prep it for the UVB light. And I feel like most of the research that's out there and the studies that are out there about the UVB and cancer are with a lot of tanning beds, right? Where people are just jumping in the tanning beds and they haven't prepped their hormonal system and their skin to receive the UVB. So it's such a nuanced conversation when we talk about adding that lamp in to help get the D up. It's important, but it has to be done the right way, safely.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's why I tell people, it's pretty hard to hurt yourself with photobiomodulation. It's pretty easy to hurt yourself with UVB if you don't know what you're doing with it. And so always try to recreate what Mother Nature is intending. So, what time of day is UVB out? Well, depends where you're at on the earth, but, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., well, that's probably when you want to use your Spurdy then, so that's the kind of the hack is, try to recreate what Mother Nature is doing at that time of the year.
Yeah. And Corey, I mean, he lives down in Florida, Dr. Gasvini, and he says to take the Sperity outside, so if you don't have neighbors that can peep over and see you, he's like, ideally you're taking the Sperity outside between 10 and 2. So your eyes are at least getting the signal as well. So yeah.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. So you spoke about cholesterol and vitamin D. Can you expand on that a little bit for people?
So, vitamin D is a hormone, and the majority of your hormones, the precursor is going to be cholesterol. So, when the UVB rays hit your skin, it sulfates or it modifies the cholesterol, and then that prohormone goes to your kidneys and livers to actually get activated into the active form of vitamin D. So now sometimes people give me the question, like, well, can I lower my cholesterol levels if I just go out in the sun a lot? Will that do enough? Not really. Every cell in your body is making cholesterol for the most part. The red blood cells don't make their own supply per se, but the body likes to stay, somewhat in equilibrium, with the cholesterol. So, there are certain dietary things that you can do that can, modify the lipids, but typically, if you stop it, the body will go back into a homeostasis on how much lipoproteins are getting pumped out from the liver. Over time, the receptors that clear it from the bloodstream stay the same. And if you have that Niemann-1 pick-like receptor, that's genetically built into you in the gut. So that would mean, you're hyperabsorbing if that, receptor stays open. So, I've not seen that, you can get more sunlight and lower your cholesterol because you're turning it so much into vitamin D. So I usually just say, even, I guess I should back up a little bit, sometimes patients end up on lipid lowering therapies. It's not going to have an effect on your body ability to make vitamin D. You're just basically lowering the ApoB particles that are floating through your bloodstream. That's helping with vascular health. If your body needs more cholesterol, your liver will make more, or the cells will make their own supply of it.
Gotcha. And what would you consider an ideal cholesterol level? I know it's not just a standard thing, but what would you say is an ideal level?
So that's a kind of a loaded question. It really
Yeah,
depends on
it
what your arteries what are seeing with that. So if you could only look at one quote cholesterol number, I would look at your ApoB containing particles. And the ApoB is on the outside of your LDL particles, the VLDL particles, and LPA little particles if you have LPA, which 20% of the population has. And LPA is the kind of major genetic risk factor for early cardiovascular disease. So everybody should have their LPA levels checked at least once in their life. And if elevated, talk to somebody like myself or somebody who understands how you can mitigate all the other risk factors. Because right now, there's not great treatment options for LPA. But anyway, the ApoB would be the lab that I would look at. If you have no known cardiovascular disease, so you've not had a heart attack, stent, bypass surgery, stroke, probably would like your ApoB number to be around 90. If you already had one of those type of events, you probably want that number under 60. There's a better chance that the arteries can do reverse cholesterol transport, and you can shrink plaques down if your ApoB numbers are closer to 60.
Okay. That makes sense. And people should also look at their CAC score in correlation with that, do you think?
For sure, because I do have patients, they're in their 70s and 80s and they have calcium scores of 0 and they have quote high cholesterol.
Right.
In the traditional world, you see high cholesterol and, equals you should be on a statin, but statins are tools. Statins, have other pleiotropic effects. Yes, they lower the lipoproteins, but they lower inflammation. They help endothelial function. They change soft plaque into harder plaque so it doesn't rupture. So somebody's already had a stent or bypass or heart attack. You're trying to prevent their second events. If the person has a low calcium score and they're 80 years old, well, whatever they're doing is working for them. Those cholesterol particles are not getting retained in the arteries. So, don't go messing around with Mother Nature at that point. But that, does kind of get to the point, like, should you be trying to lower your cholesterol levels to begin with?
Right.
Well, like I said, Mother Nature put this stuff into you for a reason. But when people live outside of harmony with Mother Nature, there's a lot of issues that go on with their system. They hyperinflame their system, they oxidize their cholesterol, and all this stuff is, basically setting fire to their arteries. Well, this is the case where you maybe want to use modern medicine to kind of put the fire out while you're trying to change your environment.
Got it. So if you prescribe statins to your patients, you're also working with them on their overall life, right? Their circadian rhythms and their light environment, all of that stuff, correct?
For sure. For sure. Yeah. I mean, I learned from somebody, a wise healer uses whatever works, try to use the least toxic thing to work. Sometimes modern medicine is the right answer. You're trying to put out the fire while you're trying to figure out what put the fire in there in the first place. And then you're optimizing their circadian rhythms, their lifestyle, and, hopefully they've improved their quantum yield. And if they've done that, then you peel off, the pharmaceuticals or the supplements that they've got added on to them.
What type of supplements, or do you ever use supplements instead of a statin? And if so, which ones do you use?
I mean, it's always individualized to, what is going on. Is the person, hyper producing in the liver? Do I suspect they have an issue with their LDL receptor not clearing it from the bloodstream? Or have I done testing that shows that they're hyper absorber sterols? If they're, hyper producer, there's probably more options. So, something like, omega-3, if people are going to supplement with omega-3, it basically will pull down that lever of making less LDL particles. You'll have lower triglycerides, quote, higher HDL-C, which that's a whole nother story. High cholesterol or high HDL doesn't necessarily mean that you are healthy. But the omega-3s will help lower the production of those LDL particles. Niacin can help, bile acid sequestrins. That's usually a prescription, but there are some kind of supplements that will bind the bile. Bergamot is somewhat kind of like a natural HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor. That's the same enzyme that the statins work on. So not as strong as a statin, but can pull down some of those ApoB containing particles. There's a supplement called berberine. Berberine is typically used for kind of gut health, kind of like also kind of like metformin. It helps the body use glucose more efficiently. But from a lipid standpoint, it's a weak PCSK9 inhibitor. So the PCSK9 inhibitors are the injectable medications right now. Praluent and Repatha are the two on the market. There's an oral one coming soon. But PCSK9, when it's, basically the levels are knocked down low, the LDL receptor stays out longer, and the blood is cleared more efficiently of these cholesterol particles. So those are kind of the main, quote, supplements I'll use if people are lower risk. They're either statin intolerant or, just say, hey, I'm just not taking a statin. Okay, well, work with us. Now let's try to get your ApoB numbers down to a certain level that the arteries aren't getting impacted anymore.
Gotcha. That makes sense. I love that you use all different types of modalities for your patients, because I feel like so many of my clients they have cholesterol, it's a little on the high side. And the first thing that the doctor wants to do is put them on a statin, just like immediately. And it is so individual. You look at the whole lifestyle, right?
For sure. And I mean, like so I tell people, statins are tools, I definitely disagree that the statin should be in the water. And I also disagree that statins are poisons, that nobody should take it. Do I know that it affects the mitochondrial respiratory chains? Yes, I do know that. But, there are ways you can do it in a more safe manner. There's things you can supplement with to kind of support the body. If you're going to be on a statin long term, maybe you're doing intermittent dosing. And there's different statins that tend to work better for certain people. There's ones that are more water soluble, and there's ones that are more fat soluble. Tend to use the more water soluble ones. And then, you check these genetic markers, essentially, if you're going to dose a statin, what dose you're going to use. So use the right dose and the right type of statin if you're going to pick it, and make sure that person is high risk. If they have a high risk calcium score test or high risk, other type of vascular imaging, then, statins are probably indicated to lower the risk while you're trying to figure out why that plaque was building up there in the first place.
Awesome. That's very helpful. I feel like I'm going to be sending some people your way for sure. One thing I wanted to talk to you about is sleep apnea. I feel like this is and how much you deal with that and how clinically you help people with that, because it's just a huge problem that so many people have sleep apnea. And as a cardiologist, I feel like we should be concerned, correct? And how that affects the heart, right?
Very, very much so. And, I, take a pretty detailed history on people's sleep quality, and, a rough estimate. I always ask the bed partner, do they snore, stop breathing? Okay, that's a good starting point. But, do you wake up in the morning? Do you feel rested? The answer is no. Maybe they have apnea. Do you have headaches, dry mouth in the morning time? Do you feel like you got to take a nap before noontime to, get about your day? Do you easily fall asleep when you're like sitting in traffic, at a light? These are all things that like you weren't getting good restorative sleep at night.
Mm.
And basically, anybody comes in to see a cardiologist who already has known vascular disease, so they got plaque somewhere in their arteries, or they have an abnormal heart rhythm issue, especially atrial fibrillation, you almost always assume they have sleep apnea until you prove that they don't. And now there's some companies that make some nice home testing kits that measure the oxygenation, also measures the peripheral arterial tone. So you wear this particular watch and you sleep in your own bed, and the next day it tells you how many times you stop breathing in an hour. And then if it's more than mild, then probably therapy is indicated. Weight loss is always kind of the number one goal. You kind of can change the dimensions of the neck. Sometimes that back of the airway doesn't collapse. So sometimes you can work with, your dentist as well to make a mandibular device to keep the airway open. But if it starts to be more moderate or severe, then at least while you're trying to figure out if there's a reversible cause, then that's when the positive airway pressures, the CPAPs and BiPAPs are useful to keep the airway open so that the person's able to get some type of sleep so that their body's able to repair itself. Basically, sleep apnea is just going to rapidly age you because you never get into that deep sleep. And so you never really do autophagy or apoptosis.
Yeah, it's really astounding how many people are suffering with sleep apnea now, and they really want to heal. They want to do all these things to improve their health, but I feel like they really need to tackle the sleep apnea before anything else is really going to be effective.
Correct. I mean, I usually talk about kind of being 4 pillars of health, and everybody tends to want to focus on the nutrition and exercise. The ones they tend to skip over a little bit is, the stress management. Stress is normal in your environment, but how well can you bounce back from that? How resilient are you? From my world, that would be your heart rate variability. But
Yes.
most people kind of, overlook is the sleeping component to it. They have that idea, I'll sleep when I'm dead. And if they really believe that, they're going to be dead before long. So you should almost focus on that. Your sleep is the most important thing you need to do every day and build your life around that, getting optimal sleep. And so, if you have apnea, you got to get the apnea treated so that you can get to that, level of sleep that your body needs to repair itself.
Yeah, and you mentioned heart rate variability. I feel like that's a term that a lot of people talk about today. I've got my it's on airplane mode, don't worry. But, we are looking at these numbers, and I don't think people really understand or know what they need to be looking for as far as HRV levels go. And it's individual, right? So what might be really low for me, or looking low for someone might be good for that person. Can you delve into that topic a little bit more? I know that's a loaded question.
Sure. So, I mean, heart rate variability is the beat to beat difference in your heart rate. So, if you've ever put your fingers on your pulse and you're taking your pulse and you get a, 1 beat every second, then your heart rate is 60. So, as you breathe in and out, there's different stress and strain on the body as you're stimulating the vagus nerve. And so, as you breathe in, your heart rate expands, you breathe out, it contracts. So, your heart rate's kind of, going between 60, it goes up to 70 and it drops down to 55. And, it should be kind of a wide variance. It shouldn't be like a metronome just pounding at 60. And while you can measure your pulse, manually, you cannot measure your heart rate variability manually because it's, measured in milliseconds. For the people who can, read EKGs, it's the R-to-R interval that you're measuring. So there are different trackers. The Oura Ring can do it. The Whoop Band can do it. I tend to also like one called Elite HRV. They have a little finger probe that does it, or you can use a chest strap that measures your heart rate and it'll calculate the heart rate variability. There's different measurements of heart rate variability, so it's a little bit hard to say, okay, which number you're actually looking at. Sometimes they're just measuring the millisecond difference. Then there's other things you can do that measure like the logarithmic change in it. So I won't go deep into that part, but maybe I'll do a IG live soon about just heart rate variability to say what are the different ones you should look at. But you think of the heart rate variability as just a metric of like how much stress your body's sensing at that moment. And yes, everybody's gonna have their own, natural baseline. So I know sometimes it's popular online to, compare your heart rate variability to somebody else's. It may not necessarily be comparable. You just want to know what your own baseline is. And then, next morning you wake up and your heart rate variability is, 20% lower than normal for you. Well, maybe you didn't sleep well. Two, maybe you did, hard workout the day before, you haven't fully recovered. Well, that just means it's not a day for you to, go pushing it super hard in the gym if you're going to the gym that day. But three, maybe, maybe you're coming down with a virus or something and your body's starting to fight that. So, that's a day you want to really focus on recovery. So getting more sun exposure, get your shoes off, go stand on the earth, do all the things that you know to do to boost your redox potential. Because the heart rate variability is somewhat of a metric of, how well your redox potential actually is.
Interesting. Yeah. My HRV was always in the 20s. And I was like, oh gosh, I'm really not doing so well here. And then I quit coffee back in February of this year. And within just about a month, I would say it doubled. And it was averaging like the teens and 20s. And now without the caffeine, without the coffee, it's 40s, 50s, sometimes up to 60s. I find if I megadose CoQ10, I can get my HRV up like a lot higher. I'm like, I don't know if that's a good thing. I'm just kind of playing around with it, but it's interesting to see how that kind of plays out in my own body.
For sure. And I mean, that's what I, recommend the kind of the biohacker, mindset be is, make some metric that you're going to follow. So okay, it's heart rate variability, change something up in your nutrition, cut out caffeine, add something, definitely one of the things that, thrashes most people's HRV is alcohol, especially the timing of it. So, not recommending people be day drinkers, but keep it away from the time that you're going to sleep. And, your heart rate variability should be better while you're sleeping then. Just use it as a metric of, if you have really low HRV, look into your environment and try to figure out, is there something that you can mitigate? And then retest it. And, once your heart rate variability is, where you want it to be, you don't necessarily need to be wearing the ring every day.
Yeah, it's one of those things that can be really addicting. I'm trying to wean myself off of wearing my Aura so much now that I'm really learning about circadian biology and all this stuff. I'm like, even though it's on airplane mode, I probably am tapping out my own body's battery just by having this thing on. So we get so addicted to all of our metrics, and I got a free Apple Watch with this company that I'm talking about their product, and a free Apple Watch came with it, and I haven't taken it out of the box. And they were like, how do you like the watch? I'm like, well, I don't know if you want to have this conversation with me, but I would be glad to send it back to you, because you just couldn't pay me to put one of those on at this point,
Right. I mean, it's, it really sort of depends on, if you're going to use something like that, do you fully, know what the side effects of wearing something like that is? And if you already know what it is, you're not going to put it on you to begin with. So,
right.
Make sure that the information that you're going to gather from some type of device that's strapped to your body is worth, the risk of it. And, get the information and then take the thing off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those things that's like a slow thing. I'm fine with keeping my windows open, even if it's cold. I cold plunge in the mornings. I'm barefoot in my backyard all the time. But like, for some reason, taking my ring off I feel naked without it. So I'm trying to get there.
So, I mean, one way to do it is just don't wear it during the day. I mean, I've played around with the words. Just slap it on at night, airplane mode, take off in the morning, download the data, go upon your day.
Yeah, that's a thing we were talking about in the, I told you before we started the interview, I'm doing the Quantum Health TV health coaching certification. And there's actually a physician who's doing it with us, and he wears an Apple Watch. And we had this whole conversation last week about, why do we need to have, like, if you ran 4 miles, right? Like, if you worked out, do you really need to know how many steps you took that day? Do you really need that information? I mean, it's like, let's really think about that,
Also, I just think too, is like, how much, do you need to be interrupted during your day? Every notification, every ding, like that's just so stressful to your system. Like, can you just be one-on-one with somebody? Can you be in the moment? When you got these devices that are always pinging you, not only does it take away, your emotional energy, it's literally going to be taking away your, mitochondrial energy as you're wearing these things on your body. The semiconductors and those things are stealing electrons from your, carbon-based semiconductors.
Yeah, I know like I said, I talked with Dr. Gasvini last week, and we kind of had a heart to heart. He's like, your job, what you do for a living on the internet, you might want to think about that if we're really wanting to talk about your mitochondrial health and optimizing. we really need to look at how much you're on your phone, seriously. And I was like, well, I'm just trying to mitigate it as well as I can, but it is a conversation that I need to have. It's like, the more I'm on my phone getting these notifications and like uploading stories and interacting with people on my Instagram and on my YouTube, how much is that subtracting from my overall health, you know?
I mean, I 100% agree. I mean, social media is great that we can connect with people who are like-minded and you can learn from people all across the, the world, but it definitely comes at a health consequence.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm not hardcore enough where I could say that like, okay, if you're going to use social media, you got to be outside, barefoot, grounded in the natural sunlight. But maybe that's what we really got to tell patients. Like, I'm not going to take
That's
your
what
phone
I've
away,
been doing.
but you have to be outside. You can't use it inside. Maybe just start there with some people.
Yeah, I mean, that's my rule with myself. And I told Corey, I was like, well, when I'm checking my notifications, I swear to God, I'm barefoot in my backyard. I swear. And here, I mean, I've got my window open, my screen is on red, and I have a grounding mat underneath my feet. So I have a few things, and I don't have anything wired up to my head. So I have a few things I'm trying to do to mitigate, because I know at this point what I'm doing to myself. And it's like, all right, you gotta figure out a way to balance it all if you're going to continue to be on your device, because yeah, we're all attached to our devices. I mean, some people never put them down. They're constantly on them, and they're wondering, I mean, these are the clients I get. They're like, I can't lose weight. I can't sleep. I feel terrible. I'm not eating any carbohydrates. I'm buying all my food from a local farm. I'm, doing all this stuff. And I'm like, well, let's talk about your habits with electronics, like, and how that could possibly be playing into your health. And they don't want to hear it. But when you've tried everything else, it's like, okay, that's where I got to. And that's why I interviewed Dr. Cruz. I was like, all right, well, something's not clicking here. It's time for me to pay attention to this other stuff,
For sure. And I mean, and there's so many of those things that, I've listened to Dr. Cruz talk about, and like, you honestly don't even believe that it could be that simple or
Right.
that could be that true. And just, seeing every sunrise is going to improve your mood and your sleep. And, I think the other big one was just that, like, the hybrid tanning, that like you could go outside, get some red light in the morning time, and then you would never burn, or at least you'd be less likely to burn. Like, I just didn't believe that could be happening. And I did it. And I just, which it's down Cancun for the past couple of days, teaching some other people how to do that. And it's just these simple things, the more you reconnect with nature, the better you're going to do. Modern machines are great, but know that there's going to be a health consequence of using that stuff. So, the more sick you are, the more, you're going to have to reconnect with nature. So it's not saying throw away your phone, but just know that you need to be careful with these things.
I agree. Well, I did want to ask you one more question. What would be your definition of like the perfect quantum day for yourself or for one of your patients?
So a perfect quantum day would be you to rise shortly before sunrise. If you're up before sunrise, put on a pair of blue blackened glasses that filter out that high intensity blue light. If you're inside, use minimal lighting, if anything. If you're going to use lighting, tend to use amber or red lighting in the morning time. Once it's sunrise, be outside, ideally barefoot or wearing some type of earthing grounding shoes, and go for a walk. Be outside for at least 20, 30 minutes in the morning time, get your body moving. Then come inside, have breakfast within an hour or so of that sunrise. Ideally, something probably mostly protein and fat, heavy, carbs based off your, exercise ability or, glucose tolerance to begin with. And then go about the day, doing what you need to do. If you have an inside job, do your best to mitigate the light environment inside, add more red light back inside, and then get outside, for, sunlight breaks, check in with the sun, a couple times a day so your body knows what time of day it is to make its hormones and neurotransmitters. And then stop eating at least 3 to 4 hours before you want to go to bed. Once it's dark in your home, try to keep it that way, and definitely put on your glasses, probably the more dark ones, an hour or so before you go to bed, and just, listen to your body's signals. And when your body's tired, go to sleep. So, there's not a magic number of hours you need to sleep, generally gonna be between like 7 and 8 hours that you need to run your full, repair programs, but just listen to your body.
I love it. That's a great, great piece of advice. And, you're obviously living it and working with your clients, helping them. What's the best way people can find you if they want to follow your work or if they even want to work with you?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to chat with your audience. If people are more interested in, the way that I practice, my form of quantum cardiology, I'm pretty active on Instagram. My handle there is Dr. Twyman. It's DrTwyman. Website's the same. It's drtwyman.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I link all of that in the show notes for everyone so you guys can follow him. And you do Instagram lives just about every week, right?
Generally do them every Monday night, 6 o'clock Central Time.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, I'll link all that below. And thank you so much for coming and chatting with me today.
Thank you again.